Hey folks, welcome back to the show. In case you're new to the program, this is Healthy Hypnosis, a show that helps to educate and enlighten you on the serious-minded, helpful side of the field of hypnotherapy. Every once in a while we deviate off of the hypnotic highway and we journey down other paths and routes and bring in other guests who may not be in the field of hypnosis. It just satisfies my own interest and curiosity, and it's an opportunity for me to get my friends on television. So this would be one of those days. I'm happy to introduce Kate Genovese, who's been here before. You're back for round two.
Round two.
You must like it, right? So you came back for more.
We had fun last time.
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
Yeah, that's good.
It's been a while, and you.
Right.
I'm going to read Kate's little bio here. Kate is an author. She's a member of the National Writers Union. She's the author of 3 books: 30 Years in September, a nurse's memoir, and Loving Joe Gallucci, Love and Life with Hepatitis C. And the 3rd book, and I think the most recent, is 2 weeks since my last confession. You're also a nurse.
I am, registered nurse.
You work in home care?
Yeah, I work for Hallmark Health and Hospice in Malden. I'm a manager in the office, so yeah, it's been good.
It's great that you have a job like nursing because there's no stress and you have a lot of spare time to work on your writing, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Right.
I got to wake up about 4 in the morning to do my writing.
Is that right?
I do a lot of my writing early in the morning.
I know we talked about this before, but we have so many new viewers now as the show continues to grow and expand. So how long have you been writing?
I started writing, well, first of all, to back up, I always loved reading. When we were growing up, I grew up in a big house, big family, and my dad and mom would make us read books. We had to as a requirement. And then would either have to do a book report or tell a story about the book and act it out.
Really?
So we had to do that. So I loved being a storyteller, so I'd act everything out of, you know, the Nancy Drew books, whatever I was reading. So it was a lot of fun. But in 1995, I was going through a little bit of a difficult time, and I decided to get some help. I went to a social worker, and she said, you know, writing is very healing. She said, you should try it, just sit down and write. So, I mean, I had read so many books my entire life. I started to write, and it helps you heal, as I said. And all of a sudden, I turned this opportunity and this event that was happening into my life into a book.
Right.
And the title actually is A Silence So Still. But that was all for healing, and it's in my bottom drawer.
Really?
So I really realized how much I did like the writing process, and I decided to write something. I was going to try and get it published. And that's where 30 Years in September came in.
Well, on that subject, let me read the description.
Yes.
And then you can go into detail.
Yeah.
30 Years in September, a nurse's memoir. Kate's memoir describes the adventures of her nursing career, the struggles with addiction, and the rewards of recovery. It carries the reader through the 80s and 90s, where she writes about her struggles with the healthcare system, as well as the hilarious anecdotes about nursing mishaps, truly magical accounts of near-death experiences, and tales of strength and hope and courage in the world of sickness and death. That makes me want to read it. Yeah.
Well, being a nurse, you might.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting how that came to be. I really, you know, I was a visiting nurse then in the Arlington Visiting Nurse Association, but I was out on the road and I actually did the Burlington area. So I had a patient that I would go see, and his name is in the book, and I know he wouldn't mind me mentioning his name, Joe Lombardo. Young man in his early 40s who was a school teacher. He was a diabetic. He became legally blind, and he had had a liver and pancreatic transplant. And I'd go into his house because he developed wounds.
Right.
I'd go in his house twice a day. And I watched this guy get depressed, and it was bothering me. So I would just tell him funny stories of nursing. And, you know, sometimes I'd have to call other patients from his house, and they'd hear me, you know, hard of hearing patients, and I'd be screaming in the phone at them. And he was just getting a kick out of it, and he kept saying, why don't you write these things down?
Really? That's where the seed was planted?
Yeah, so I, you know, I boo-hooed it at first, but then my mom died that September, and I had to go up her attic and clean it out. That was my job. So I went up there, And all of a sudden I saw all my nursing books when I started school in 1970. And I said, oh my gosh, look at these. And I looked through them, and you know, all these memories came back of how I tried to talk my parents out of making me go to school because I wanted to go to Woodstock that summer. Oh, let me start later. I really want to go to Woodstock because I had to
This is really
start.
cool concert that's coming in. Yeah.
So that conversation went south.
Did you make it to Woodstock?
No, I didn't. No, I had to start
That
school.
would be a whole other show,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
yeah. So anyways, that's how it came to life. I
Okay.
realized I didn't have to write all about nursing.
Right.
And so it became this story of my life as a nurse intertwined with personal events. Like
Right.
I did get mixed up with drugs a little bit in the early 70s, lost my license to nurse, got it back, and you know,
Yeah.
it was over with.
Yeah.
So that was healing in itself.
Right.
But it was fun to write. You know, I interviewed a lot of my friends that were nurses, and it's a lot of laughs too. It really is.
How long was that project, the first book?
I started that in 1998, and it was published in 2001.
Wow.
So really not too long. It
Not
took me
really.
about a year to write. Finding a publisher was the hard part.
Yeah.
Very hard. And I finally found him, and it came out a year after that.
So you were pulling all these memories from your nursing career. Was it, well, 20 years or so into nursing at that point?
Well, actually, it was 30.
Was it 30 then?
Because I was
Okay.
an LPN first. And,
Okay, right.
And then I got my RN. And I worked at Leahy for 19 years. So
All
there's
right.
a lot of hospital stories,
Right.
school nursing stories, and visiting nurse stories, you know, intertwined with my life. So it was fun to write.
Any of those interesting stories come to memory now that might be worth mentioning? The humorous patient stories, or I should have told you before we started that I might ask you that because I didn't think of it until now. But.
Well, sometimes you laugh when you're there. It might not seem so funny, but there was a charge nurse that was very funny at Leahy, and she always had us howling. And one day she stood up by the computer, like she got out of her chair and stood up, and a doctor came by and moved the chair. And so she went and sat down and just fell right on the floor.
Classic
It's not so
slapstick.
funny.
No.
It was pretty good.
So did that make it in the book?
Yeah, it did.
Of course it
It's
did,
in the
right?
book, yeah.
Any patient stories that you can recall? Nothing springs to mind right away.
Not really. Maybe
Yeah.
by the end of this I'll have
Yeah.
some in my head, yeah.
So I'm sure you had the funny ones, as it said in the bio there. You had also had the sad ones, and
Yeah, I mean, it was, when I think about it, my first patient I was at Beth Israel. That's where I did my first rotation. And the first patient I had, Mary Hill, was dying of cancer. And she was my age now, but, you know, I thought she was just so old.
Yeah.
But she really wasn't. You
no,
know,
she wasn't,
had
was
kids
she?
my
She was
age.
just a kid.
And so she was dying of cancer.
Oh,
Yeah. And so it was hard. I remember being a student and saying, oh, I can save her somehow. I mean, you know, this treatment's going to work. And I remember going home that weekend and telling my mother about it. And I said, but she's going to get better. And my mother said, I don't think she's going to get better. You know, you better face up to this. If you're going to be a nurse, you're going to have to face this stuff.
Yeah. And you,
Yeah.
and you in the bio it mentioned some magical accounts of near-death experiences.
Yes. Now that was a lot of fun to interview people, and I really believe that happens. And I interviewed one man who he was at Leahy, and he I forget why he was there, but it was the second time around.
Right.
But his first time, he had a heart attack. He was playing pool with his friends, and all of a sudden he collapsed, and he was young.
Right.
And his friend, who was a physical therapist, did CPR, and he had a near-death experience. And he was brought right to the light, and God said, you get back, you take better care of yourself, you
Really?
turn your life around, because he said he was a pretty selfish guy. So he became very religious and kind of turned his life around.
So he came back to consciousness with that directive to
Yeah, I
start
don't know
taking-
how quickly he worked
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
and processed it,
Yeah.
but it was pretty neat.